Alright, so we left off with episode 39. We're now picking up with episode 40 of Marvel Ultimate Alliance. We're now in the hyperdrive section of the Shi'ar ship. We are still looking for Lilandra, and we're still trying to get that Makran crystal, and we're still running into Shi'ar guards, and because we unlocked all the costumes on Miss Marvel, we're now maining Venom to unlock all of his stuff. And as a DLC character who was added to this game after it came out in the Champions Edition, sorry, Gold Edition. Hi, not Superman. We now have to fight not Superman. Because Venom came out in the Gold Edition, his requirements for his final suit unlock are actually a little different than normal characters. I think he just has to accumulate 200 kills or something like that. It could be a larger number than that. But now we're fighting the Shi'ar warrior Gladiator, who basically seems like a Superman ripoff, and also evidently gets caught on scenery. But there's some stuff around here. Basically, we need to destroy we need to weaken him so we can hit him, is basically what it is. And we have to do that by turning on these energy transfer modules to do that. I don't know much about Gladiator other than his sort of resemblance to Superman, which evidently might be the most interesting thing about him. I don't know. Okay, now he's woundable, so now we can go beat him up. Assuming I don't just collect coins the whole time. But Gladiator is the character who decided in the Brian Michael Bendis X-Men / Guardians of the Galaxy run that Jean Grey from the past, who had not yet become the Phoenix and destroyed a planet, the Shi'ar Empire, and killed billions of people, was just as culpable for Jean Grey, the Dark Phoenix of the future's crimes, and so he wanted to have a trial. I'm not exactly sure what that would have I'm not exactly sure what that accomplished, because I'm not familiar with that book. I'm just generally aware that that was a thing. I'm sure there are people who are going to be like, well, who cares? And there are going to be other people who are like, now wait a minute, there are some very important details you're leaving out here. And yes, I am. I do not claim to be incredibly versed on the Marvel Universe. I just enjoy the parts of it that I like, and I happen to know a little bit more about those parts than I do the other parts, and even then, it's not going to be the depth of knowledge that, you know, a real reader of comic books is going to have. Like I said, I'm telling you about the fact that I'm reading Maximum Carnage 25 years after it was published, because I'm trying to figure out what exactly I had, what made it so interesting to me as a kid, or maybe just because I can actually buy it now, or own it now, and I couldn't own it back then. We were talking in the last episode about the sort of, you know, moral codes of the various, mainly of Spider-Man and Venom in Maximum Carnage, and how they conflict, because Spider-Man and Venom fight each other several times in the Maximum Carnage story, mainly over whether or not they should be killing other characters. Maximum Carnage is structured kind of weird, and I think part of it had to do with the fact that they didn't have a true 14-part story that they really knew they wanted to tell. There's for instance, the first couple episodes or issues are basically devoted to building the two teams. So there's usually a fight between Spider-Man and Carnage, and their squads where another character shows up to help one or the other. In Spider-Man's case, Cloak and Dagger show up as his first reinforcements. Carnage meets Shriek in the first issue of the story, and also meets the Spider Doppelganger in the first issue of the story as well, and then they go out and go kill people. There are very few... What's interesting about Maximum Carnage is, despite the fact that Carnage is supposed to be the most dangerous of his characters, he's really, I would say Carnage is kind of underwhelming throughout Maximum Carnage, and I'm not just saying that because the title's name is Maximum Carnage and we got something less than Broly's power being a maximum kind of deal. But what's really going on in the story is the partnership of Carnage and Shriek. And it's not really Maximum Carnage so much as it is Maximum Shriekage. Because you're introduced to Shriek, and she does most of the dirty work in the story. She's responsible for keeping the family, the group of supervillains together.
Isn't technology a wonderful thing?
And she's the one whose power is to basically serve as an aggression vessel, so she can transmit her pain and her anger into the people around her, which is mostly shown in Maximum Carnage through the people in New York. Forming mobs, attacking our heroes, doing other things, you know, that are not particularly happy. But she also affects our heroes, arguably. With Venom, it's kind of hard to tell that she's actually having any effect. It's more the conflict that Spider-Man has that seems kind of out of place. That suggests that maybe Shriek's powers are starting to affect him too, because you know, he has moments where he's like, you know, fine, I'm not going to play by the rules anymore, or something like that. And so Maximum Carnage, the point of Carnage is, Carnage basically wants to rain murder on New York. And because he's as strong as he is, and because he's supported by characters who help him, and because the only person who can be bothered to stop him, at least initially, is Spider-Man and a few other street-level types like Cloak, Dagger, and Black Cat. Yeah, Carnage has a pretty easy run of things, except that his lack of an objective, other than just mayhem. You know, it's clear that he's trying to create some sort of, or fulfill some sort of family dynamic that he never had growing up in an orphanage, or at least it's clear that Shriek is trying to do so. Carnage kind of resists the whole being a father figure, particularly as the team gets larger and attracts characters that don't have a real natural allegiance to him. Demo Goblin, who is on some sort of religiously inspired quest, you know, clashes with Carnage throughout the stories because their agreement between the two characters is that people need to die. The difference is that you know, which people need to die. Carnage believes everyone needs to die. Demogoblin believes that sinners doesn't need to die, and he just has a very large definition of what a sinner is. So they clash. The spider doppelganger, who's sort of a mindless beast anyway. Maybe Carnage was threatened by his quote-unquote coolness, or the fact that he looked a lot like Spider-Man. But Carnage and the doppelganger only get along because Shriek is there, and possibly because Demogoblin and the doppelganger have a connection from the past too that's not particularly well explored in the book. But yeah, Carnage just kind of running around doing stuff. There are several there are a couple of set piece battles that occur in the books. I mean, there's a big one in like episode 6. I think it takes place at a nightclub where Mary Jane happens to be. I want to say it's number 6. It might be a little further on. But the fights are underwhelming because generally what happens is that Spider-Man and his allies engage Carnage and his allies. Spider-Man and his allies will gain the upper hand and then bicker, allowing Carnage and his crew to escape. Or, as occasionally happens, Carnage and his crew will gain the upper hand and then decide to just leave.
Maybe next time you should try running away.
For reasons that are not particularly well explained. And really, very few of Spider-Man's allies really need to be in the story. If you ask me why Morbius the Living Vampire is in Maximum Carnage, I guess maybe because, like Venom, he's an anti-hero of sorts. And what's interesting is that, well, we just lost Venom off the side of the ship. By the way, we're in space, so clearly falling, big deal. So does Morbius need to be there? No, but again, the Spider-Man's not picky for allies at that point. Cloak kind of hangs around. Eventually, though, he will bail because he'll feel damage, or he'll decide that he needs to basically revive Dagger. However, whatever the process for doing that is, and Cloak doesn't really explain what he's doing other than just sort of hanging out back at his church and stuff.
That's right. I won. Fear me.
Captain America appears after the capture of Venom in issue 9, and doesn't particularly do anything memorable. He's evidently the only Avenger who didn't go on the field trip. And I can include the Fantastic Four in that group because they tried to run down Johnny Storm and could not. They were not home. So you did get this scene where Spider-Man and his crew, which is Venom and Black Cat, had to break into the Baxter building to steal the sonic gun of Reed Richards that the Venom symbiote is weak to, so they could try to use it on Carnage. and trying to break into the Baxter building is what alerts Captain America that something's going on, because the people who are in the street rioting and getting killed by Carnage and his flunkies by the hundreds, not enough of a clue. But Captain America has one really cool moment where when he joins. I mean, obviously, he shows up. Spider-Man. There's been a big fight at like Central Park, and Venom's been captured in the course of the battle. Firestar sort of had this moral crisis of, you know, of whether she should be killing Carnage or not. Speaking of Cap, we've lost him, so it's not just Pete and Carol for the potentially the remainder of this little trip here. But he shows up and, you know, he knocks out Shriek in his first appearance, because Carnage has decided that it's too much fun to torture Venom, something that doesn't, I don't know if that makes sense for Carnage's character to do, but again, it removes Carnage from doing anything interesting because he's too busy not killing Venom.
Hey, you did good work. You got them all.
So, I mean, that's a thing. So, Captain America and the group that they've sort of gathered face Shriek for the first time, and Cap knocks her out with his shield, and that's perfect because, again, Carnage isn't really the problem. Shriek is. As much as Maximum Carnage is called Maximum Carnage, Shriek causes more problems throughout this story than Carnage does, and you know, the problem ends when Shriek is defeated by the positive endorphins gun that Danny Rand's money and Deathlock's scientific genius were able to put together off screen while Spider-Man was trying to take on the entire Carnage gang by himself, without even the help of Captain America, who couldn't have helped build the gun. But I guess the Carnage gang had to be assured that Spider-Man was vulnerable, so they would all stay in one place and could be shot together, kind of thing. So Cap does that one moment where he knocks out Shriek, and then he gets eaten by crowds. Not eaten literally by crowds, but crowds kind of overwhelm him because when Shriek revives, she's able to get her power back, and Iron Fist is able to... Iron Fist comes into the story, and again, other than providing the technological money and resources for something that's done off screen, you know, he's basically... He has one moment where he's able to use his chi, or ki.
Neutron. It appears the reports of humans on board ship are true. I would
To
not have
calm the
believed
crowd
capable
before
of getting this far.
they go back and go crazy again when Shriek recovers. And
We are Imperial Guards.
again, that's the one moment he gets, but he gets to be in the story.
Without the help of the
Nightwatch
Imperial
shows
Guard,
up. Morbius tries to free Venom from the Statue of Liberty,
no. Most
again,
of them
doesn't
were
particularly
fools who wouldn't
succeed,
listen to reason.
and he's helped by this guy named Nightwatch, who I'd never heard of, who I'm told is a Spawn ripoff.
We could have dealt with even the mighty Guardian. Just as
And
we're going
Venom
to
gets
deal with
loose.
you now.
Flee while you can, humans.
So that the ultimate resolution to the story, after Carnage is hit by the positive endorphins gun, along with everyone else, although the doppelganger has been killed by Carnage, So, I mean, that's like the most effective thing Carnage does in the story is he killed the doppelganger.
You're too weak to fight.
So in the end, you get the Spider-Man and Venom versus Carnage fight that sort of teased the entire book. Except that Carnage is clearly reeling from the effects of the gun. And so Venom and Spider-Man, or Spider-Man doesn't really want to fight him, but Venom really does. But what's interesting is that Spider-Man managed to convince, or I think Spider-Man wins the argument with Venom a little bit. Because in the end of the story, Carnage is defeated when he's thrown into an electrical transformer generator kind of thing by Venom. In a way that doesn't look like Venom would necessarily survive the ensuing blast. So that in the end, Carnage is defeated without killing him. The guy who does it's technically Venom, and he does it in a sort of moment of self-sacrifice, understanding that nobody else is going to be willing to go this far to stop Carnage. And then the Avengers show up and take Carnage away, and you know, nice to see you guys. Where you been, kind of thing. But Maximum Carnage is over, and basically what Maximum Carnage has been is just this one long fight between, you know, these two groups of heroes where Carnage, I mean, in theory there are people getting killed off screen. You're not really sure how many or with what effectiveness, because no one seems to care. Except when Mary Jane gets threatened, or when Harry Osborn's, or the quote-quote Spider family, which in this book includes the robot versions of Richard and Mary Parker, along with Molten Man, who I didn't realize was Liz Allen's brother, or something weird like that. I also didn't realize that Liz Allen had married Harry Osborn. Harry Osborn his funeral was at the very beginning of the Maximum Carnage arc, and so the writers trying to make Mary Jane seem very unsympathetic are, you know, basically have her just angry and concerned at Spider-Man the entire book, because he sort of promised after the death of Harry Osborn he would stop being Spider-Man for just a little while.
Impossible.
And then immediately Carnage showed up. So yay.
I am the Empress. Kneel before me.
You lie. If I am to be denied, then I will stop dear
So that's,
as well.
By destroying this.
I mean, that's Maximum Carnage. Probably a much more interesting idea for a 10-year-old than for a 35-year-old. But yeah, one of the three pieces of